As I was researching fishing spots, I came across a local Oregon legend that I had never heard before. Could there be a lost gold mine in the Oregon Coast Range, purposefully covered up by Indians? I won't make any claims to the truth of these stories. To be honest, they seem a little far-fetched, but they're extremely interesting and might be worth checking out. Early trappers to Oregon's Coast Range heard stories of a place that the Chinook Indians went to collect gold of extremely high quality. They always asked where they got the gold, but it was treated with secrecy and never revealed. As the region grew more and more settled, the Indians would engage in trade with the settlers, apparently paying in gold nuggets. One of the most prominent places for these gold nuggets was Gales City, now just known as the unincorporated community of Gales Creek in Washington County at the start of the Coast Range foothills. The shop owner in Gales City apparently pressured the Indians so much about where they got this gold from that the Indians took their business further east to Forest Grove. There they did their business with Cornelius's Mercantile. One day, some men tried to follow the Indians from Cornelius's Mercantile into the mountains to learn the source of their gold. There they captured and threatened the Indians with death. The Indians told the men that they would rather die than betray the source of the gold. If that wasn't bad enough, another group of prospectors who were looking for gold held up a pair of Indians, father and son, who were carrying heavy packs. Upon opening the packs, the prospectors found they had almost 60 pounds of gold on them. To put that in perspective, that's worth almost $1.4 million on the date that this video was made. The prospectors demanded the Indians revealed where they got the gold, and the Indians again refused. This time, however, both Indians were shot and killed. The Indians had already been leery of white settlement, blaming their problems on the mine, but this was the nail in the coffin. Upon learning of the death of two members of their tribe, the Indians decided the mine was cursed, and to continue to take gold would only anger the spirits within. They decided to conceal it forever. The story could have ended there if it wasn't for the white family that settled on the Trask floodplain near modern Tillamook. They had a Chinook housekeeper who they had treated with love and respect throughout the years. On her deathbed, this housekeeper confided the location of the gold mine to the white's youngest daughter, whom she had a great relationship with, and then died immediately after. Years later, this daughter, now a young woman, fell off a horse and was picked up by a man named Emmerich, who tried to do everything he could to save her. She was so grateful that she gave Emmerich some gold nuggets and told him she got them from the Chinook gold mine in the nearby mountains, and then gave us our best clue of finding the mine. The mine was located in a black canyon where a stream empties into a small lake. And then in traditional dramatic fashion, she died immediately after. Emmerich, however, would apparently spend the rest of his life looking for this gold mine, even going to the extent of selling all his property and belongings to fund the search, never being successful. Emmerich's neighbor Frank Waitress, who also became fascinated with the mine, had more success though. Waitress was apparently very methodical and resourceful with his search, and after a decade of looking, found the mine near the crest of a ridge, just like the white daughter said, in a black canyon where a stream enters into a small lake. The shaft had been filled in, and in an adjacent canyon he found piles of quartz with small nuggets of gold. As Waitress tried to uncover the mine, horsemen rode up on him and told him that it was private property and he needed to leave. He tried to go back multiple times, but was discovered each time and told to leave. He later died in a car accident. I'm going to go into possible locations for the mine. If you'd be interested in seeing a video where I deep dive into history, fact check the story, and look for other sources, please like, comment, and subscribe and let me know. Until then, I'm going to come up with some ideas of where the mine could be, going purely off the story and treating it as fact. Searching for this mine with the clues we have, and then adding to the idea that it was purposefully concealed, is like searching for a needle in a haystack. As you'll see soon, there are a lot of places this mine could be, likely somewhere in the Tillamook State Forest or on private timberland, if it exists. The story says that the Indians would head into the mountains from Gales Creek, on foot, and return in a few days with the gold. I have no clue as to how fast these Indians could travel through this rough terrain, but I do know they had an extensive network of trails that are now almost entirely lost. I will give them a range of 35 miles. This would mean that if they traveled to the outer limits of the range, they would have to travel a total of 70 miles, mine the gold, and be back in 3 days. We don't know how they got the gold. Some stories say they could just carve it out of the rock, while the story of Waitress indicates a more extensive mining operation, which would seem to take longer. One theory that makes more sense to me is that the Indians simply found a shipwreck, which wasn't uncommon at the time, on the coast that was laden in gold, maybe a Spanish galley. They then stashed the gold somewhere in the mountains and would return for the cash when they needed it to trade with the settlers. You can see, it is a large area that the Indians could possibly be traveling to. We can probably disregard most places east of Gales Creek, and in the valley. As the story says, they headed into the mountains. We have Tillamook Beach on the extreme west, almost to the shores of the Columbia River on the north, and past the Nestucca River and almost to Grand Ronde on the south. With these parameters, we can start to use the clue from the White Daughter, a black canyon where a stream enters into a small lake, and what Waitress said about it being close to a ridge with adjacent canyons. I would like to deep dive into history and check out these people and see what other information we can glean, but I'll save that for another video. The most obvious thing we could look for on maps and satellite imagery would be the small lake. The thing is, the small lake or pond could be entirely gone or dried up in present times, and the same thing goes for the stream. There are a few places that stand out immediately to me and others that have investigated this. I also want to note that the White's daughter, who lived somewhere on the Trask floodplain, said the gold was in the nearby mountains. Look at the relationship between the location of the Trask floodplain and Gales Creek. They are connected nowadays by Highway 6. It's nothing more than an assumption, but I feel the gold would be closer to the Trask floodplain than Gales Creek, since she said it was in the nearby mountains. So are there any small lakes in the nearby mountains? The first and most interesting lake, as well as the closest to the Trask floodplain, is Skookum Lake. Others have speculated about this lake being the source of the gold, but I haven't seen anybody else make some of the connections between the actual history of the lake. The name Skookum itself might provide us an important clue. Skookum is a Chinook jargon word that has historical use in the Pacific Northwest, has a range of meanings commonly associated with an English translation of strong or monstrous. The word can mean strong, greatest, powerful, ultimate, or brave. Something can be skookum, meaning strong, or monstrously significant. When used in reference to another person, he's skookum, it conveys connotations of reliability or a monstrous nature, as well as strength, size, or hardworking. But even more interestingly, a skookum is a variety of mountain giant or monsters similar to the Sasquatch or Bigfoot. In the surviving Chinook Wawa spoken in Grand Ronde, Oregon, this variant is pronounced differently, skookum, but when used in English with this meaning, it is pronounced the same way as the big and strong meaning. And this, I think, is the most important part. Skookums were bad spirits or devils, which crows, eagles, owls, blue jays, various beasts, and reptiles could be representations. They can inhabit people and cause serious illnesses. This all sounds familiar as to why the Indians shut down the mine in the story. They were afraid they were angering the spirits. Going through the Oregon newspaper archives searching about Skookum Lake, I found the natives were immensely scared of this place. This article appears in the Sunday Oregonian, August 16, 1908, and is titled Skookum Lake Bugaboo Scares Off Tillamook Fishing Party. Prominent citizens of Dairytown take fright at night, leaving blankets and camp equipage behind in mad flight. Apparently headlines rhymed back then. The article tells the story of a group of fishermen that got so frightened by a hideous noise at Skookum Lake that they abandoned all their belongings and ran back to town. This seems to be a common theme about Skookum Lake, but more interestingly is what it says about what the Indians thought of the lake. Very few old residents of Tillamook County would dare to spend a night on the shores of the lake, and it would be utterly impossible to get an Indian within miles of it. It then goes on to explain about the Indian legend of the lake here. Legend connected with the lake is as follows. Old Killam's the chief of the Tillamook, or as it used to be spelled, Killamook. Indians used to get terribly excited when telling the story. Indian tradition tells that in the days of long ago, many, many moons, before ever a white man was known on the coast, the lake was the favorite camping, hunting, and fishing grounds in the fall of the powerful Killamook tribe. It was their custom to visit the lake, which swarmed with fish, and the shores of which were overrun with deer, elk, bear, panthers, and other animals. The squaws would pick immense quantities of berries, especially the blueberry, and dry the fish caught with, while the bucks would go off and kill their winter supply of deer, elk, and other game. One day, while the bucks were away hunting, this big skookum, an immense monster, came out of the lake and dragged one of the most prominent and best favored of the squaws back to his haunt in the center of the lake and disappeared. The rest of the squaws raised a great alarm, which reached and brought back the hunters, who, when they heard the tale, immediately struck camp and packed everything out that night. The lake was given the name of the Great Skookum and has been held by the Indians as haunted and accursed ever since. Young Killam, the son of the old chief Killam, is on the Grand Ronde Reservation now, and nothing would induce any Indian on the reserve to go near Great Skookum Lake. There are a few other old articles I can find about the mysterious and feared Skookum Lake. This article from the Daily Astorian, published on January 9th, 1895, is the oldest, and it also gives us another interesting tidbit of Skookum Lake that might relate to our gold mine. It says, there is a little natural meadow around the lake, and an old deserted cabin is there. Some rich-looking ledges of mineral are found nearby, and it is said the cabin was the habitation of an old miner who disappeared mysteriously. It then goes on, saying, besides, the region is said to be haunted, and none of the Indians of this vicinity could be persuaded to go near it. They have many peculiar traditions about Indians losing their lives there in mysterious ways, and the disappearance of the old miner could never be accounted for. All persons who have visited the place declare something is wrong. And Hank Stampin, I said that right? A cool-headed, skeptical old pioneer, visited the place once and was forced to acknowledge there were some queer manifestations there during the hours of the night. It is needless to say that few ever remain there over one night. It then goes on to say about this super tough guy who killed a bear in hand-to-hand combat and had all these adventures and stuff, basically trembles whenever he relates his Skookum Lake experience. Then there's this article in the Tillamook Herald that appeared in September 17th, 1915. It basically tells the story of two brothers who made an adventure to the lake to dispel the myths that everybody had about the lake because it was pretty popular in those days, or it was pretty well known that the lake was haunted. So they just went to dispel the myths, and they didn't find anything haunted about it. I thought it was an interesting read though, and I recommend it. There are a few other articles that can be found in the early 1900s about the spooky going on at Skookum Lake, but they don't provide any new relevant information to our gold mine, so I won't go over them. What we can say for sure about these articles is that the Indians were afraid of Skookum Lake and that there was an old miner that was investigating some potentially rich minerals there. Remember that in the story the Indians shut down the mine because they thought it was angering the spirits. Perhaps their fear of Skookum Lake is related. Or perhaps they invented the stories and scared the scuttlers away so they wouldn't get the gold. We see that there are a good number of streams entering into Skookum Lake from the surrounding mountains. The clue is that the mine is in a black canyon where a stream enters into a small lake. We should also remember Waitress's finding where he says that the mine is located near the crest of a ridge. Skookum is basically surrounded by mountains around 1,200 feet higher than it. In my opinion, it would be valid to investigate up close to the ridge line of all these creeks entering into Skookum. They have obviously done some logging on the north side of Skookum Lake, so if there was something there, I'd expect it to be found. The south side looks promising with four streams emptying into Skookum Lake, each with their own little canyon. But are these black canyons? We can actually simulate the sunlight in Google Earth to see what they look like throughout different times of the day. Starting at 8 a.m. and continuing throughout the rest of the day, we can see that two canyons with creeks draining into Skookum Lake remain dark throughout the day. The history of Skookum Lake and its proximity to the Trask floodplain, as well as its alignment to the story's clues, make this a great candidate for the gold mine. Let's go ahead and check out some other spots though. If we move northeast from here, we can get to Blue Lake, another spot that seems to fit the description. I will fly over some other spots I've marked on the map, but I've kind of ruled out these spots as they are missing some important characteristics. For example, the spot below has three small lakes but seemingly no stream or canyon. Blue Lake seems to be more of a match though. We have a stream that is actually the beginning of the North Fork Wilson River, going into Blue Lake, but we also have a small body of water a little higher than Blue Lake, directly under a steep ridge. Let's take a closer look in Google Earth. I'm not sure if you could consider this a canyon, but the cliff face directly above the small pond seems interesting to me. It is likely my imagination, but it almost seems there's a streamline coming from the cliff face there. Maybe there used to be one in the past. This place, while remote, would be a lot easier to access from Gales Creek than Skookum Lake. It has been logged and probably thoroughly explored though, except maybe at the cliff bottom where the trees seem to be bigger. The mine, according to Waitress, was at almost the crest of the ridge, so this would be the spot if it was here. I also ran the sunlight test in Google Earth, and this canyon seems to have sunlight throughout the day, although the others on the north side don't. Let's go northeast, flying over Torrent Pond, which was a mill pond that wouldn't have been created yet during our story's time period. 2 miles north of it, however, we have a small pond with a stream and a canyon with adjacent ones. Switching to satellite view, we see the area is heavy logged, and we barely see the pond. Let's just go to Google Earth and check out the ridge tops of both these canyons for a little more info. You can't see the pond in Google Earth either, and it seems like the ridge and above haven't been logged, but it's hard to tell how big these trees are. The canyon to the south is where the Nehalem River starts, and I've heard that small amounts of gold have been panned out of here. These two canyons are the closest places to Gales Creek we've looked at yet. If we check the sunlight in the canyons, we find that both experience a good amount of darkness in some spots. This is simulating January though, so it isn't going to be perfect, but gives us a good idea. If we move 2.5 miles to the west, we get to the no longer existing pond bed of Wheeler Pond. I haven't checked into the history of this pond on why it is no longer there, but it used to be on old maps. And if we check the south of it, there's a canyon with a stream running down. Let's see what Google Earth shows. Checking in Google Earth, the area is heavily logged and the canyon doesn't look too promising. The sunlight test shows that it is dark most of the afternoon. Moving over this ridge, there is a small lake in rough terrain that probably only a handful of people have been to. There's a stream from this lake going into the Salmonberry River below. These canyons are very dark, but doesn't necessarily strike me as the place of the mine. Skipping over some small lakes to the north, we get to Prius Run Lake about 500 feet below Lost Lake, in a deep canyon with a stream. There appear to be modern quarries on each side of the canyon, and the stream flowing through the canyon isn't actually flowing into the lake. But perhaps the cliff face directly above the lake would be a good place to look. I also wouldn't describe this canyon as dark. Flying back west, we get to Soapstone Lake that does have a stream flowing into it. In Google Earth, we can see that there are adjacent canyons that are dark for most of the day. This place is directly north of the Trask floodplain. Heading south, above the Trask floodplains, and directly south of Skookum Lake, we get to a couple marshes with streams running off the high mountains above. The topography here is so interesting and fits the description for the mine. We can see the outline of the two streams running off the mountain and into the tough-to-see marshes below. The faint outline of the forest road directly above looks very overgrown as well. The sunlight test shows that these stream canyons do get a fair amount of light in the afternoon though. Many places we can eliminate just by switching to the 1930s map to see that those lakes and ponds weren't there at that time. Not that they had mapped everything, but if it was next to a road or trail, we can assume that they would have put it on the map. Unfortunately, we don't have a 1930s map around the Skookum Lake area and mountains to the southeast of the Trask floodplain. I'm not sure if they never made one, or if it is lost. While making this video, I've continued to find interesting spots that might fit the descriptions we have. There are too many to go over. There are also a ton of unanswered questions about the story, and I feel I've hardly scratched the surface. I'm more inclined to believe that the Indians had somehow come upon a large cache of gold and stashed it somewhere in the mountains. This would contradict Waitress's account though, and we know he was a real person. We also have to remember that Waitress found the mine on private property. He died suddenly in 1964 at the age of 81. How long ago had he been out looking for the mine? I can't imagine a guy in his late 70s accessing some of these remote places in the late 1950s. When Waitress was discovered by the men, he told them he was looking to build a cabin there and concealed what he was truly doing. Could those men already know about the mine? Was the gold taken by them long ago? Is it still private property, or was it consumed by the Tillamook State Forest? Does it even exist? If you're interested in similar videos or digging deeper into the history of the people, time, and places of the lost mine, please like, comment, and subscribe and let me know.